Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host and husband. And today, Omar, I'm really going to be bringing you in here today because we're actually going to talk a little bit about a topic that I feel like is your specialty, since you did a presentation kind of similar around this topic at our client retreat, which was just, really only like a month and a half ago, but feels like a lifetime ago. And so I wanted to both pick your brain and also walk through some specific scenarios that we, or I at least, have commonly seen across our clients when it comes to the holidays. We know that the holidays brings a lot of challenges, but the challenge is less, in my opinion, about like actually sticking to your goals or actually figuring out how to navigate your nutrition, your fitness, all these things. I think the biggest challenge is navigating the social side of the holidays and sticking to the goals that you might have set for yourself.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this stuff. Like you were saying, I did talk about this at our client retreat. And no big deal. If you want to book me for a private gig to have this conversation at your event, please do so.
You can reach out to me and I will negotiate his $100,000 speaking fee.
Private jet, no big deal. But yeah, like you were saying, I think it's a really good time of the year to talk about this kind of stuff and just setting and teaching people how to set those healthy boundaries, how to have those difficult conversations when they need the most help and support when it comes to these things. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think like almost a little bit of a preemptive part of this conversation is you need to go into this kind of episode understanding what your specific goals and boundaries and what it looks like for you to navigate your health and fitness through the holiday season, because it is going to look different for everybody depending on what is going on with your health right now, what kind of season of life you're in, what you're specifically working on. And there's no right or wrong answers with this. We really do approach each and every client differently when it comes to the holiday season to help them figure out what is the best way to approach specific holidays. Of course, this obviously being a great resource for our clients. If you have not yet, definitely speak to your coach or reach out to me as well, and we can talk through to figure out what it's going to be the best approach for you specifically. But if you're not a client, I would encourage you to go back to some previous episodes we've done around that topic specifically. So there is episode 38, episode 42, and episode 148 were all similar approaches, but talking in different ways about how to navigate the holidays, kind of how to set boundaries, how to set goals, like different things around that. In this episode specifically, I want to talk about when you have those goals set, when you know specifically how you want to approach, the holiday itself or the holiday party at work or the extra treats in the house or all the different things that tend to come up around the holiday season that might not align with your specific goals. And when you may or may not have people in your life, whether it's family members, friends, spouse, coworkers, when they might, challenge you or make comments or just, do or say things that might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. That's what we're specifically going to talk about here today.
Yeah, let's dive in. Let's do it.
So one thing I also want to say with this is not to say that you necessarily have to tell everybody what your goals are. You do not need to go and make this
everybody,
announcement.
Look at me.
You don't need to go on Instagram unless you're me and I kind of do this for a living. You don't necessarily need to go on Instagram and tell everybody, hey, everybody, I'm going to be, tracking macros this season. So I want everybody to know that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be, working out on these days, or I'm going to, you don't need to announce those types of things. And I feel like that should be obvious. But I actually think back to myself in my early days when I was bouncing from diet to diet. And there was a period of time where I had decided that I was paleo. And when you decide that you're going to be paleo, it's not that you eat paleo, it's that you are paleo.
You live, breathe, and you are paleo.
Yes, it is like a way of life. And so I had decided, of course, that I was going to be paleo probably in October. And so then November, Thanksgiving came around. I went home for the holidays because this is when I was living in Atlanta. So I flew down to Tampa Bay to spend time with my family for Thanksgiving. And I remember the week before kind of stressing and being like, oh my gosh, I haven't told my family that I'm paleo. How am I going to tell them?
You sound like you're coming out of the closet and being like, exactly. I'm paleo.
And I was getting so in my head about it that I asked a friend who also ate paleo. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to kind of tell my family, what do you think? She's like, you're not coming out of the closet. She's like, you don't have to tell your family that you're eating paleo now. She's like, you can eat whatever you want. And if it naturally comes up in conversation, you can approach it. But I have to share that story because I think it's funny, but it's the reality of sometimes people get into certain types of approaches, not the type that we teach here, but you may or may not have a mindset around your health and fitness to where suddenly you feel like, man, this is my whole life. This is my identity now. And that can feel conflicting when you find yourself around people who may not also share that kind of identity and those maybe beliefs around food and fitness.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, though, although you don't have to necessarily come out and be like, hey, you guys, I'm paleo, or I'm this, or I'm that, or whatever, I do think it is important, though, to share a little bit of like boundaries and telling people, this is what I want, this is where I need help and support. And I'm pulling up this notes from the presentation that I did at the client retreat. But I think sometimes boundary or confrontation or difficult conversations have such a negative connotation to the point where you're like, I don't want to talk about that, or I don't want to set boundaries because for me, I'm like, what are people going to say, right? Or for me, I'm like, what are they going to think of me when I say that? But if we're being honest, a boundary in itself, simply put, is just a property line. Like, it defines who you are, it defines where you end, it defines where others begin. And at the end of the day, boundaries help define who we are in relationships. So if you're having, you coming back from Atlanta to Tampa Bay and being like, hey, you guys, I just want to explain kind of where I'm at and where things are where I need a little bit of help and support. And again, if you're explaining this to somebody that cares and genuinely wants to support you, they're going to understand, right? Yeah. And so I think that negative connotation maybe comes because we just haven't been able to do this in the past, or we haven't known exactly how to navigate stuff like this. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean or be a bad thing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I think your ability to navigate more like uncomfortable, more difficult conversations, that's always going to strengthen your relationship, regardless whether it's like your romantic relationship, a friendship relationship, a work relationship. The better you can navigate hard conversations, the stronger that relationship is going to become. It's the reality of things. Well, let's go ahead and I want to share maybe like 5 different scenarios that I commonly hear come up. I think probably every listener will find maybe one of these scenarios at least is something that you might resonate with, or you might feel like, oh man, that could definitely happen in my life. And so I want to talk about each of these scenarios, how we could approach it in a very constructive way where we are setting boundaries in a very healthy way, in a very constructive type of difficult conversation.
Can I drop in one last little nugget before you go into the framework and scenarios?
No.
Please.
Yes, you can.
So I kind of forgot this, and I think this is very important. The other thing, too, before we start to get ready and have these conversations or be like, okay, this is how I'm going to talk to my family or my boyfriend or husband or whatever, I think one of the hardest conversations that you need to have beforehand, before you talk to the other person or the other, part of the relationship, is the one that you're having with yourself, right? And
deep.
so, I know. And so I think, again, to me, I'm an Enneagram 3, and I'm always very, I guess, aware or vigilant of like what other people think of me. And so, again, that in itself is a hard conversation, because if I'm not even comfortable with what I'm doing, how can others help and support me? So kind of looking inward, I think, first, and being like, well, the reason that I'm doing this, or the reason that I'm setting this boundary, is because I want to be a better mom, or is because I'm done being uncomfortable in my body, right? And again, those why questions, like why are we doing this to begin with, those are so important, because it allows you to be like, well, in order for me to fill my cup, in order for me to feel better, I need to share this with others so that they can support me. But again, if you don't have that conversation with yourself first, and you're just like, yeah, I just need to do this because I want to, it makes things a lot harder for you to follow through. It makes things a lot harder. Why are you smiling?
I think you're great.
You're freaking me out. But anyways, yes, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, I love it. Awesome. Well,
You're a weirdo.
Oh, you know what? You love that I'm a weirdo. But let's go ahead and talk through some specific scenarios. So let's role play it here. I wrote out some kind of potential conversations that could happen. So scenario 1, imagine you are,
Can I play the friend and say?
Oh yeah, we can absolutely.
All
We
right.
can go back and forth on these things. So scenario 1, imagine it is December. Your company announces we're going to have a holiday party. It's going to be a potluck. Everybody sign up to bring something. Everybody's bringing something. It's going to be amazing. You go and look at the potluck list, and it's all these delicious sounding things, all things that you absolutely, do indulge in when you want to indulge in them. But you're noticing that, there aren't really any protein sources. There aren't really any vegetable sources. You say, I want to make sure that I bring those things. I'm going to be the ambassador of health here. I'm going to bring a protein dish and a side salad. And that way I know that at least there's something there that I really want to fill up on, because that's going to support my goals, knowing that I will probably indulge more at the actual holidays, and I may not want to indulge as much at this specific, corporate holiday event. I'm okay with kind of sitting out on some of the treats and just having a little bit of those ones. So now we arrive at the party. You're excited. You got your salad. You got your protein dish. I'm carrying it in. And then so now you walk in, you turn to your coworker, and your coworker says,
you can't even have some sugar at the party, Vanessa?
Oh man, getting that kind of comment, you're probably feeling a little self-conscious, right? You're probably like, oh my gosh, like, no, I do eat sugar. Like, I'm not like some health nut freak who just never eats sugar, but I can suddenly feel that I feel a little bit uncomfortable that I'm noticing all my coworkers have their plates full with cookies and sweets and all the really indulgent things. And I am, making my plate now with my salad and my protein and just having kind of one cookie on there. Now I'm feeling self-conscious about that. So how am I going to respond to that, kind of condescending comment from my coworker? Well, something that I might say in this situation is, you know what, I hear you, Omar, but I'm focusing on my health goals right now. And it might seem kind of strict, it might look kind of strict, but I'm really just working on actually finding balance right now. And enjoying some sugar occasionally, it is part of that balance. But I have my reasons right now for choosing to skip it at this party. I appreciate your concern, though.
I like that last part. I appreciate your concern, though, Omar.
The point here, and kind of like in this type of a conversation, what we want to really do is not get defensive, because that's, I think, everybody's first reaction. If someone comes at you with more of like that, let's say, condescending tone, you're probably going to like feel your hackles raise a little bit. You're going to be like, ooh, I'm getting a little defensive here. I want to like kind of bite back a little bit. Or maybe you're someone that wants to like shrivel up a little bit and freeze up.
Yeah.
Well, take a deep breath. What we can do is acknowledge their comment without getting defensive. So acknowledging it of like, I hear you. I hear what you're saying there, Omar. But the reality is we also need to explain a little bit of what our commitment to our health journey kind of like means, why we're committing to our health journey right now. We don't need to overshare with someone who maybe doesn't like care to hear all the ins and outs, but we can share a little bit. And what that can do is that can even help foster a little bit of that understanding, a little bit more of that positive dialogue, to where, who knows, maybe your coworker will ask some more questions of like, oh, what do you mean? Like, you do eat sweets. I never really see you eat them. That's interesting. When do you eat them? And maybe now you're talking to them about how you actually plan your treats and you just happen to not really have them at work because you find that when you eat cookies, you have a big blood sugar crash and you don't feel like you focus as well at work. And so you plan to enjoy them more in the evenings with your family.
Yeah, I think, again, if you think of it from this perspective, the people that are commenting that kind of stuff and are like looking for that kind of stuff, they have their own insecurities to begin with, I think. And so when you approach it from the perspective of like empathizing and acknowledge, by the way, here's a cool acronym that I came up with. EAR, empathize, acknowledge, and then return to the issue.
Gosh, you're so smart.
No big deal, I know. But anyways, when you kind of just treat it being like, hey, he's just genuinely curious. He's just asking and he's just wanting to know more. So I'm like, yeah, like I totally hear you. And I, it might seem, it might seem strict, but I'm really working to find that balance within myself. And then explaining all of that stuff. And then at the end of the day, like if that's their opinion, like that's for them to kind of have, right? And for you, you're like, again, going back to like when you've had that conversation with yourself and you're like, I'm doing this because of this, and that, and I want to have this, and that thing, then I got to do different things, because in order to change, we got to change a little bit too,
Absolutely. Yeah, I love it.
Let's do another one. I kind of want to work on like an accent, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, let's go to scenario 2 then. So now let's say in scenario 2, you have been working with your coach and you've determined that something that you're really working on right now, you're kind of working on the skill of tracking macros. Mm-hmm. And while some seasons of holidays, you might decide to ultimately not track on holidays or around parties, or, most of the kind of that season, you may choose not to track and you may make that decision. However, you're in a stage of your kind of process and learning to where you're actually trying to overcome the discomfort of tracking macros through social settings, through, dinners out with friends or going to holiday parties and things like that. So now here it is. It's November. You're heading to a holiday, maybe it's like a Friendsgiving party. You're heading to this party with your best friend. You guys are going together. You're going to have a great time, and you go ahead and actually pull out your phone and you start to pre-track some of the things that you think you're going to have at this party, because that was an intention that you set with your coach, was that, I have an idea of what foods are going to be at this party. I'm going to go ahead and pre-track some of them now. Mm-hmm. So you're sitting in your Uber heading to the party, you pull out your phone, you go to MyFitnessPal, you start to pre-track, and your friend says,
oh Oh my gosh, Vanessa, can't you just put your phone away for one night?
And wow, they just like laugh cruelly at you. That's cruel. Yeah. And so in this situation, even if you have like a really good relationship with your friend, you might feel like, man, my relationship with my friend, it's so good that sometimes we almost say a little bit too much of what's on our mind. Mm-hmm. And I can tell that maybe my friend is a little bit irritated with the fact that I'm going to track my food right now. So in this situation, rather than getting defensive, something I might say here is, you know what, Omar, I totally get that you want us to enjoy the night together, but tracking my food helps me stay on top of my health goals. I promise I'm going to be present. Just keeping my phone handy for a bit, it helps me stay accountable to my goals. So how about this? Let's make a pact together to enjoy the party together, and I'm just going to log my food quickly when needed. In that kind of a conversation, what you're doing essentially is really just reinforcing the importance of your health journey and of the commitments you're making to yourself and the things that you're working on. And you're also emphasizing at the same time your commitment to enjoying the moment, to being present with your friend. And you're kind of validating that, hey, our friendship and our time together is a big priority to me. This is just something I'm also working on. And you're kind of making it collaborative there with that comment of like, hey, why don't we make a pact together of, I'm going to do this, and we're also really going to be present and enjoy ourselves. That can be a way to really constructively handle something like that as well. Should we do another scenario here?
Let's do it. Which one are we doing?
Scenario 3. So now this is when, let's say it's, the day after Halloween, and you had a lot of Halloween candy around the house. You kind of already started to like work through that because you handed a lot of them out to the trick-or-treaters. But now your husband comes back from the store. He's like, babe, the Halloween candy was all on sale and I bought a ton of it. Like, this is so great.
BOGO.
Yeah, it was BOGO. It was a great deal. I'm going to fill up dishes in the house so that we have it on like every table in the house. It's going to be a great decor. And I'm just so excited because I love candy. Well, maybe in this situation, do you want to be the husband or do you want to be?
Sure, I'll be the husband.
All right. So in this situation, I notice that that's happening. Here's how I might kind of initiate a conversation around this. I might say, babe, could we maybe limit the amount of Halloween candy we actually buy right now at this point in time? I'm actually trying to stay focused on my goals, and I know these leftovers are going to be tempting.
You know what, Vanessa? Just because you're being healthy right now doesn't mean I have to be, okay?
Yeah, and if your husband came back with a tone like that and with a comment like that, what I would immediately probably think is in a moment I might want to get defensive. Notice throughout these, at least for myself, in these situations, my immediate kind of thing is like, man, I want to get defensive and defend myself.
I think you would start crying.
Oh yeah, I would definitely start crying too. But in this kind of a situation, that's not actually going to be constructive towards the outcome that we're looking for here, and kind of not even the outcome, but just the conversation itself and serving our relationship as a whole. So in a situation like this, I can take a step back. I can kind of empathize with maybe what's on his mind and some things that maybe he's thinking about and how he's maybe affected by my comment as well. And like the way that he said, just because you're being healthy right now doesn't mean I have to be. That tells me that maybe he's feeling a little bit triggered of like, oh my gosh, I'm making these changes with my health, and maybe he feels disconnected with me
that's
around
a good
that.
Point. Yeah.
Yeah. So in a situation like this, I might come back now and say, you know what, Omar, I totally understand where you're coming from, and I'm not trying to change how you eat. I just want to create a healthier environment for both of us. So maybe we can find a compromise. We can still enjoy treats together, but if we could just limit the Halloween candy in the house, it would really help me to stay on track with my goals. What do you think about that? So in a situation like that, I'm acknowledging his feelings without being defensive. Again, I think that's a big theme here. I'm really kind of putting myself in his shoes and kind of understanding, like, I understand where you're coming at. And, I'm not trying to change how you eat. Like, I'm kind of making that clear here. But the most important thing is I'm really making it collaborative around actually just finding a solution and being collaborative with it, finding a solution that's going to work for both of us. All right, last scenario here. Scenario number 4. Responding to your best friend's Christmas cookies.
Dun, dun, dun.
So this is one where I think about how, you might be hanging out with your best friend and maybe you're currently working on not having cookies all the time as much as you used to have them. Or maybe it's something where you're working on kind of planning them into your day a little bit more so it's more intentional and you're not suddenly eating a whole plate of cookies because you were ravenous and you just started to eat them and you felt kind of out of control in that situation. Well, now let's say your best friend comes up and she has this plate of cookies and she's offering them to you. So in this situation, maybe I'll be the friend here in this situation. We can kind of switch it up. So I go
such a good friend voice ready to go. But yeah, that's fine. We can switch it up.
I go and I have my plate of cookies here and I'm like, hey, Omar, I made these cookies just for you. Why don't you have them right now?
That sounds like you're trying to poison me. Wow. You know what? Like, I really appreciate you baking these cookies for me. They look delicious. Honestly, I'm going to wait to enjoy them later with my dinner instead of right now when I'm already hungry and probably going to want to eat them all.
Oh, yeah, I get that. You're right. Well,
if only it were that easy.
No, and the reality is it might not always be that easy. These are just examples of like, look, the point is what we're doing is we're just maintaining our boundaries. We're kind of explaining our thought process around things. We're expressing gratitude and we're acknowledging like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for baking me these cookies. But we're just kind of very just matter-of-factly just explaining, I'm not going to eat them right now because if I eat them right now, I'm probably going to end up eating the whole plate because I'm really hungry right now. But instead, I want to enjoy them more later and I want to have it be more intentional later.
And then, I mean, think about it from this perspective because I feel like sometimes I get into this. Like, I enjoy cooking every once in a while when we have time and I'll always be like, Ness, like, try this or do this, right? And the person maybe has put a lot of time and effort into baking these cookies for you and they're so excited to give it to you. So if you're like, you know what, I can't have them, like, get them away from me, they might feel a little, I don't know, maybe disrespected or I don't know, upset, whatever.
Well, I hope you also wouldn't say, get him away from me. I can't have him.
Right. But my point being is, again, when you kind of go through it like this and you're like, you know what? Wow. Like, thank you so much. I appreciate these cookies. They look incredible. They look amazing. I'm going to wait to enjoy them later. Again, you're still holding firm to your boundaries, but in a way that's also, I guess, respectful to the other person. And you may not even have one later tonight. That's totally up to you. Or you might have half a cookie and be like, okay, you know what? I'm still sticking to my goals. But again, to me, it just shows that there's more than one way to do this. There's so many different approaches, avenues that you can do. And it all comes from you just, again, being honest to yourself and be like, okay, I've been in this scenario before and I've gotten off track, especially during the holiday season. And instead of gaining, 5 pounds, I gained 20. And so when you stick to these things and you know, or you have an idea of how to approach these scenarios, because they're going to happen. And whether it's the holiday season or tomorrow, it's Valentine's Day or Valentine's Day or New Year's Day or so-and-so's birthday, like knowing these and having these in your toolbox, I think can be the difference maker to where you actually stick to something and you fall off track over and over and over.
Yeah. I mean, going back to even what you were saying earlier, I think it's also getting in touch with yourself to where you might be feeling uncomfortable when the other person isn't noticing anything at all. Maybe in a situation where your friend offers you the cookies and you're just like, oh, wow, thank you. And you set them aside and maybe your friend doesn't think anything of it, but maybe you're getting really like awkward and being like, oh my gosh, are they getting offended that I'm not eating it right now in front of them? So maybe in that situation, it helps you to go ahead and verbalize that of like, just so you know, I'm super excited about these cookies. I'm not going to eat them right now, even though they look amazing, because right now I'm really hungry. And if I start eating them right now, I have a feeling I'm going to just eat the whole thing and I'm going to feel, not my best later. And that's something I'm working on. So I'm going to plan to have this with my dinner tonight. Yeah. Thank you so much for making these.
Or because when I used to work in an office setting, a lot of times like suppliers or vendors would bring this stuff to you, but they don't really care if you eat them or not. They're just like doing their job. They're like, I just want to foster the relationship. So they might come in and be like, hey, I baked these for you. But in reality, they like bake them for every single one of their clients. So to, again, just thank them and be like, awesome, great, I'll have one later. And they don't think anything of it. They're like, okay, cool. Like, I'm done. And I'm like, all right, so let's talk, whatever product I'm trying to sell you kind of thing.
Just because it was free does not mean you have to eat it if you don't actually really like it.
Ooh, I like that.
All right, last scenario here. I think this one is one I hear a lot. So I think this one's going to resonate with some people. So let's say you're going home for the holidays. Maybe you love your family, but maybe when you're around your family, there's some tension. There's some stress when you're around your family. And you kind of get a little bit tense even thinking about going home. Like as soon as you walk in the house, your mom, she's always going to make a comment about something in your life with you. Like it just always feels like you could never do enough, right? Well, now in this situation, you just get home, everybody gives hugs, you're all happy. And you walk up to your mom and your mom makes a comment.
All right, I'm going to be funny here, but I know it's not funny because it does happen. But just for, purposes here. So, yeah, mom comes up and she's like, Vanessa, how long have you been on that diet for? I don't really see much changes in your body. Are you sure you should be eating that for lunch? You probably need to eat less, girl.
Yeah, I totally get it, Mom. I actually appreciate your concern about my eating habits, but currently I'm actually working on a reverse diet to help improve my metabolism. And it might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but eating more in a balanced way is actually part of my plan right now for my long-term health. And honestly, I would love your support in this journey instead of focusing on how I look right now.
And I'm going to add one more. Because normally the people that criticize you have zero idea what they're doing, and they've struggled with these things over and over. And then the mom will say something like, well, you know what? When I used to do it, I didn't used to do that, and that didn't work for me. So maybe you should look at a different approach, because everybody has an opinion, and they have zero idea what they're even talking about. You know?
If they haven't really achieved what you want to achieve and like actually maintained it, then that's also probably a pretty good idea that they probably don't really have insight. But even if they have, every body is different, and what works for some people may not work for you, and that's okay. And I wanted to end on this one because I think it's so important to establish these kind of boundaries when we do get that kind of criticism about how we look, about, if your mom knows that you started this kind of nutrition program and she just assumes that means that you're doing some crash diet, and she's looking to be like, how come I don't see changes in your body yet? And she's criticizing what you're doing. She's challenging this whole concept of you eating more instead of eating less. That can feel so triggering. This is the hardest one to work through. And it's completely okay if you need to just step away for a minute. If you're like, you know what? She's making this comment, and I feel like what's going to be my immediate response is not going to be constructive. This is not going to be healthy dialogue. I'm just going to kind of walk away for a minute, take a deep breath, and then maybe I come back, or maybe even later, I pull my mom aside and I, have that kind of conversation of like, Mom, I know you made that comment earlier, and I know it's coming from a good place. I appreciate your concern about my health, about my eating habits, but this is what I'm doing right now, and kind of gently explaining it, acknowledging that it sounds counterintuitive, kind of acknowledging her perspective, that it may not make sense to her, acknowledging that that's okay if it doesn't make sense to her, and then really taking that step back and just asking for what you need. I would love support from you right now. That would be so helpful for me. And if she can't give that to you, at the end of the day, you at least asked for it, and from at that point, that might be just a conversation for your therapist.
Well, and the other thing too, I think everybody likes to criticize and give their opinions and be like, no, what you're doing is wrong, until it actually works for you. So when you give yourself the patience and you give yourself, that 6 month, year, whatever, to work on these things, and next holiday season you come around and you're looking all, lean and toned and have the body you want, and they're like, oh my gosh, how did you do it? And then they're like, okay, maybe I should have listened to you in the first place. So again, sticking to, like you were saying earlier, do the things or follow the people that have done the things that you want to do. That's what creates the most success, not your everyday person that's like, oh yeah, I've been trying to lose weight for 20 years and here I am. But don't do that, because I know what I'm talking about, right? It makes no sense.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, I hope that this was helpful for you guys. If there are any kind of scenarios that we did not cover here that you might
any role-playing scenarios you want me to do?
Yeah. No, seriously, if there are any scenarios that you're maybe anticipating in your life or that you've been through in the past, and you're like, you know what, I would love to hear some different ways to navigate this kind of situation and that kind of situation, bring them to us. You can shoot me a message on Instagram at Vanessa G Fitness. Give me a follow there if you are not following already. And I would love to kind of support you and talk you through this and help you out as best as I possibly can. But thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that you have a fantastic holiday season if you are listening to this before kind of holidays are really kicking off here. But thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe. We'll be back next week with another episode.
Bye, everybody.